Salem and the Scarlet Letter. In his writings, the noted author Nathaniel Hawthorne brought to life tales of the men and women who journeyed here from across the seas. Their ships came into this very Salem harbor, to a new life and perhaps a more terrible and hazardous one than they knew in their native lands. If you look and listen, you can feel the old Salem calling out to you from beyond its busy streets. You sense the people who once lived here, many bold and many superstitious, many frightened by the fears of the unknown of this new land, fears that led to the irrational acts which history has recorded as taking place in Salem. Beneath the modern exterior of Salem, Massachusetts, beats the heart of an early American seaport, a town rich in the lore of history, much of which has been forgotten. It was here that the famous Salem witch trials were held, the fate of those prosecuted and found guilty of practicing the black art of witchcraft, death on the gallows. Salem still celebrates this most inglorious past, and the existence of the Salem Witch Museum alone bears sufficient testimony to that fact. Salem's most famous citizen is still well remembered. Author Nathaniel Hawthorne has a statue in his honor in the middle of the town, only a block removed from the Hawthorne Motor Hotel. Hawthorne stands there quietly as the modern hustle and bustle just passes by all around him. Hawthorne's birthplace has been preserved, amidst other relics of the past, which cast their ghostly shadows over the modern lifestyles they contrast with. Hawthorne himself felt the presence of the history around him. He wrote, "This old town of Salem possesses a hold on my affections, the force of which I've never realized during the seasons of my actual residence here. The figure of that first ancestor, grave, bearded, sable-cloaked, who came so early with his Bible and his sword. He was a ruler in the church. He had all the puritanic traits, both good and evil. His son, too, inherited the persecuting spirit and made himself so conspicuous in the martyrdom of the witches that their blood may fairly be said to have left a stain upon him. So deep a stain, indeed, that his old dry bones in the Charter Street burial ground must still retain it, if they have not crumbled utterly to dust." I know not whether these ancestors of mine bethought themselves to repent and ask pardon of the heaven for their cruelties, or whether they are now groaning under the heavy consequences of them in another state of being. Hawthorne's work brought worldwide attention to Salem. In fact, the strange stories he told were in part inspired by his own family's history. In 1692, Judge John Hawthorne, an ancestor of Nathaniel's, presided over witchcraft trials which sent many innocent people to their deaths. The House of the Seven Gables, published in 1851, was based on the existence of a real house owned by Hawthorne's cousin, which still stands today. Hawthorne wrote, "The old pension house, otherwise known as the House of the Seven Gables, bore the humbler appellation of Maule's Lane, from the name of the original occupant of the soil. Old Matthew Maule, in a word, was executed for the crime of witchcraft. At the moment of execution, with the halter about his neck, 'God,' said the dying man, pointing with his finger, with a ghastly look at the undismayed countenance of his enemy, 'God will give him blood to drink.' The colonel, like most of his breed and generation, was impenetrable. He therefore dug his cellar and laid deep foundations of his mansion on the square of earth whence Matthew Maule, 40 years before, had first swept away the fallen leaves. Thus the great house was built." Colonel Pynchon's sudden and mysterious end made a vast deal of noise. That there were marks of fingers on his throat, and the print of a bloody hand. The skeleton hand which the lieutenant governor was said to have seen at the colonel's throat, but which vanished away as he advanced farther into the room. Salem's old waterfront is a National Historical Site. The development of the seaport in the mid-1700s had much to do with the development of this country and its international commerce. Ships left Salem's shores with cargoes of insulated ice, a treasured item to trade in the Far East. They returned with spices and other trade items, beginning a period when Salem was recognized as the principal seaport of the New World. In the mid-1800s, when Nathaniel Hawthorne was to enter the world of maritime trade, Salem's seaport had run down. Its warehouses were crumbling, and other ports were taking away her former glories. Hawthorne got a job at the waterfront in the custom house. It was during this period that he was to research his greatest novel, The Scarlet Letter, first published in 1850 and considered America's first literary masterpiece. Hawthorne's background and his roots in early New England history led him to create this fascinating study of desire and cruelty. In Hawthorne's preface to The Scarlet Letter, he tells of an almost mystical story which encouraged him to write the novel. On the transfer of the archives to Halifax, this package, proving to be of no public concern, was left behind, and had remained ever since unopened. The object that most drew my attention in the mysterious package was a certain affair of fine red cloth, much worn and faded. It was the capital letter A. My eyes fastened themselves on the old Scarlet Letter. Certainly there was some deep meaning in it, but evading the analysis of my mind. I happened to place it on my breast. I experienced a sensation as of burning heat, as if the letter were not of red cloth, but of red-hot iron. I shuddered, and involuntarily let it fall upon the floor. The Puritan life of the Founding Fathers was a hard one. They lived in primitive homes and performed their simple tasks as they worked the land. Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote of these people and their strange superstitious behavior in The Scarlet Letter. He gathered here and there an herb or grubbed up a root and put it in a basket on his arm. Hester gazed after him a little while, looking with a half-fantastic curiosity to see whether the tender grass of early spring would not be blighted beneath him and show the wavering track of his footsteps. She wondered what sort of herbs they were, which the old man was so sedulous to gather. Would not the earth, quickened to an evil purpose by the sympathy of his eye, greet him with poisonous shrubs, a species hitherto unknown, that would start up under his fingers? Or might it suffice him that every wholesome growth should be converted into something deleterious and malignant at his touch? Would he not suddenly sink into the earth, leaving a barren and blasted spot, where in due course of time would be seen deadly nightshade, dogwood, henbane, and whatever else of vegetable wickedness the climate could produce, all flourishing with hideous luxuriance? Or would he spread bat's wings and flee away, looking so much the uglier the higher he rose toward heaven? Hawthorne's tale of The Scarlet Letter is timeless in quality, not in theme. Its story of puritanic law and punishment is difficult to transfer to another time in history. Still, it is a classic in every sense of the word, as unique as its narrative. The townspeople assembled and leveling their stern regards at Hester Prynne, yes, at herself, who stood on the scaffold of the pillory, an infant on her arm, and the letter A in scarlet fantastically embroidered with gold thread upon her bosom. She turned her eyes downward at the Scarlet Letter, and even touched it with her finger, to assure herself that the infant and the shame were real. Yes, these were the realities. All else had vanished.